Okay. Good Friday morning, everyone. Happy February 5th. My name is Tim, and welcome to the Urban Ecology Center's Backyard Naturalist series, the one about the snow fleas. I do want to take this moment to say a huge thank you to the supporting cast behind these weekly get-togethers, starting with Ethan and Maggie, who have not only given excellent programs in the past, but who support this series in many, many ways, mainly with their brilliance and creativity, but also with logistics, organization, and fabulous ideas. I also want to give a huge shout out to the marketing team from the Urban Ecology Center, Anna, Carrie, Jean, and Jeff. Also Marky, who's moved on to exciting new adventures. And Danny, who expertly coordinates the UEC in My Backyard website, Trivia Nights, and the Urban Ecology podcast, not to mention their 5 Facts videos. And finally, our unbelievably talented registrar, Madeline, who is so good at solving complicated problems with many moving parts. And she makes it look easy, even though it's anything but. Today's episode, Snow Fleas on Cedar, seems appropriate since the skies opened up yesterday and gave our yards a fresh new palette of snow to use as a backdrop for looking for these critters after this Arctic blast makes its way through in the next few days. First, props to the parent website, UEC in My Backyard. After the wellness break, we had a surge of new material that poured in through whatever they need to go through to enter the websites, starting with a 1-2 sting of videos on bees, a 5 Facts with Danny on the Western honeybee, and bees and beekeeping with UEC beekeeper Chris Steinkamp, where he shares his knowledge of backyard beekeeping and honey production using the Top Bar Beehive at the Menominee Valley branch as a backdrop. There's also a new video from Jose on how to go sledding. What a fabulous idea for a video. There's some tips and tricks because we just might keep getting snow for a while, so might as well make sleigh while the snow flies and enjoy it. There's also, and I'm really excited about this one, an audio drama for kids, Nature's Mystery Theater, The Case of Mitch the Missing Mosquito, with all parts voiced by the fabulously talented early childhood specialist, Matt Flower. And since we're all snowed and colded in anyway, what a better way to spend the evening than together on the living room floor by the soft, warm, nostalgic glow of the computer screen, listening to this audio mystery the way kids used to listen to Little Orphan Annie or The Lone Ranger or The Green Hornet. But from all the new content for today's trailer, I'm bringing back a familiar face and voice, environmental educator Miguel Santos, who just does the most heartwarming and fun videos, especially when he gets his kids involved. And for this video, he's introducing us to a new set of his dependents. So let's all sit back and enjoy the marvelous stories from Miguel.
Hello, friends of the Urban Ecology Center. How are you? I have heard you are learning about birds. I love birds. I believe they are fascinating creatures. And it's crazy to think that we got this out of this. Yes, because birds are the only surviving dinosaurs. Birds have evolved from dinosaurs. And needless to say, birds have extremely cool adaptations. You know, adaptations, something that animals have or do to be able to survive. You know, let's take a look at some of these adaptations. Because birds, first of all, are vertebrates. What does that mean? They have a backbone. And let me show you a little model. And this is not a real representation of the skeleton, but it gives you more or less of an idea of the backbones. The interesting thing about birds is that they have hollow bones. What does that mean? It makes them lighter for them to be able to fly, because most of them can fly. But you know, ostriches and penguins don't have hollow bones. They don't have those bones empty inside, so they cannot fly. You know, maybe we can take a look at some of these birds and pay attention to those adaptations. For example, if I grab one of my pet birds, here we can see a pigeon. These are one of my pets. I really love pigeons. And here we can see that birds have wings and feathers. They have 4 types of feathers. And here we can see the flight feathers located in the wings. They have the tail feathers that are like rotors. It helps the bird find its way in the air to steer one way or the other. They have the contour feathers, so those feathers here in the surface of the bird to protect them from the water, from the rain. And then here underneath we have the down feathers that maintain the bird at a constant temperature. Well, as you can see, you know, these pigeons and all types of birds, they have different shapes, different colors, different sizes, and different beaks. They have adapted all of those features for their needs, to their environment. You know, birds are oviparous. The female bird lay eggs. Maybe we can take a look at some of these eggs right here. You can see one of the eggs, and they are going to be incubating this egg for 18 days, and a little chick will hatch out of this egg. Maybe we can take a look at one little chick that was born 3 hours ago. So this is gonna be a little tiny chick. There we can see, that's how a pigeon looks like when it's just born. That's a little chick and not even 3 hours old, okay? And they're gonna being fed by the parents. Maybe I can put it back with his parents, and we can take a look at one that it's a week old. As you can see, this one doesn't have the down feathers yet, so that's the reason the parents keep on hanging out with them in the nest to keep them warm, okay? And they're gonna continue growing feathers. Maybe we can take a look at one other little chick that is 2 weeks old. Here we can see how they grow much bigger in size, and now they're growing those flight feathers and are ready to soon become an adult bird. We have mentioned that they are oviparous, and birds can be herbivores. They can eat seeds, plants, or maybe nectar, like the hummingbird. Some other birds are omnivores, and that means that apart from plants and seeds, maybe they can eat insects. And pigeons are somewhat like this. They mainly eat seeds, but they can eat an insect from time to time. And then we have carnivore birds, those birds of prey, the hawks and the falcons that may wanna eat some of these pigeons. Well, that is all. I hope you enjoy this short explanation and keep on exploring. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Miguel. I could seriously just binge watch all of his videos. If you haven't seen them all, you can go back to the UEC in My Backyard page, go to the kids section and click on the Naturalmente link. You'll be happy you did that. I don't know about you all too, with my fancy headphones, it really sounded like there were pigeons flying all around me during that short video. So a couple more quick side notes here. Next Thursday, February 11th, Venus and Jupiter, which are the third and fourth brightest objects in the sky after the sun and the moon, will be in conjunction, or their closest point to each other from our perspective at least, just before sunrise. So you'll need a pair of binoculars to see both, because Venus shines about 6 times brighter. And so to the naked eye, it will totally outshine Jupiter. But if you have a pair of binoculars, you should be able to tell them apart. And if you're an early riser and you have a clear view of the eastern horizon, we here in Milwaukee have a little lake that helps with that. At about 6:30, you should be able to see these two planets rise together before they themselves get swallowed up by the sunlight. And if you miss it on the 11th, or it's cloudy, try again on the 12th. And then also next week, we have a couple of Yardversity activities, including a trivia night Thursday night. This may be your last chance to attend a UEC trivia night with Danny, as their family has decided to go on some new life adventures. So if you haven't yet attended a Danny-led trivia, I strongly encourage you to sign up for this one. I can't say enough about how much they've shaped this program and so much of the UEC programs in their time with us. So we wish them the best of luck and happiness in their new adventures, and their absence will surely be noticed by so many here that have been fortunate to spend time and share experiences with Danny. Next week, Friday, for the Backyard Naturalist, we have an extra special guest appearance by our friends at the Schlitz Audubon Center's Raptor program, who will be bringing some live owl ambassadors for a program entitled Owls, Designed for Darkness. So fabulous programming next week. Don't miss it. And then finally, my favorite source of information for this episode is from a local treasure, Kate Redmond, also known as the Bug Lady. Kate produces a super informative and fun to read Bug of the Week email and post. Usually it's bugs anyway. Sometimes she goes off topic and we'll talk about a plant or a mammal, but you can find her past Bug of the Week articles archived on the UWM Field Station website. So go check those out. And if you want to subscribe to the emails, you can contact her directly. But these are beautifully written natural history shorts. Okay, snow fleas. As I've mentioned several times in past episodes, I really enjoy the community that gathers with us live here on Friday mornings. And when it finally comes to sign off, I often hear a familiar voice, Mitch Ost, say something to the effect of, "Thanks, Tim. That's not what I was expecting today, and I was pleasantly surprised." And I totally understand where he's coming from, because the topics themselves and our general understanding of them tend to be a little underwhelming. And I would guess the general public, not you all, of course, but most people probably wouldn't seek out a program on archaea or bacteria or even pumpkins. And I guess they'd feel somewhat similar with today's organism, the snow flea. I mean, even when I first learned about them, I learned they weren't fleas and they sometimes hang out in the snow. Just like the Cedarburg bog isn't a bog, but sometimes people from Cedarburg hang out there. And don't get me wrong, snow fleas are super fun to look for and identify, but I really didn't expect a lot more beyond that. And like Mitch, I was pleasantly surprised with the stories from today. So if they're not fleas, then what are they? Fleas are insects, but snow fleas aren't even an insect. And you're probably saying, hey, wait a second, I can count the legs on this, and there's 6 of them, and insects have 6 legs. So what's the deal? To classify snow fleas, we actually have to go back a half step up, not a full step, because that would take us from the insects to the arthropod phylum. And snow fleas are definitely arthropods. You can see that from the potato bug episode from season 1. There's actually a subphylum under arthropods called the hexapods. And just like a good 6-sided hex wrench or a 6-sided hexagon, or hexamethonium, the non-depolarizing ganglionic blocker that we all know and love with its 6 methane molecules, and also the longest word I could find that started with hexa. The word hexapod means 6 feet or 6 legs. So insects aren't the only 6-legged sheriffs in town. The subphylum hexapod is divided into 4 groups. The insects are the most famous order, with about 5.5 million estimated species. And then there are 3 much smaller groups of wingless arthropods, smaller in both diversity and size, as many of these are teeny, 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 really hard to find. So first we have the Protura, also called the coneheads, which live in the soil and are less than 2 millimeters long, and not surprisingly, weren't discovered until the early 1900s. But today we recognize about 800 species. There's also the Dipleura, or 2 tails, of which there are also about 800 species. And then there are the Collembola, more commonly known as the springtails, of which there are about 3,600 species worldwide. At one point, all 4 of these groups were classified as insects. There's still a little bit of disagreement as to how these groups are related to each other and to the rest of the life. The 3 non-insect groups here are sometimes classified as Entognatha, which translates to internal mouthparts, separating them from the insects, which have external mouthparts. But those 3 groups are not related. In fact, there's some evidence that springtails are more closely related to crustaceans, which is another order of arthropods, than they are to insects. But for today, we'll stick with this current grouping of the hexapods into the 4 orders shown here. Snow fleas, our featured organism, again, is a hexapod, but not an insect. It belongs to the order of springtails or Collembola. I was speaking to my supervisor and fellow insect nerd, Beth Heller, yesterday. And when I told her today's episode was on springtails, she said, "Aw, Collembola, I love them." It was kind of the same way that some of us would talk about puppies or Baby Yoda. Springtails are free living in the soil. They're omnivores, and they play an extremely important role in decomposition in your backyards and other environments. And this isn't the first time that springtails have made their way into the series. In the petrichor episode, which looked at the complex factors that contribute to the smell of rain, springtails played an important role in dispersing the Streptomyces bacteria that produce geosmin, that earthy smell that's in the soil. In fact, the primary reason geosmin is produced by those bacteria is to attract springtails. So if you like the taste of beets or the smell of rain or soil, think of springtail. And in the episode on mycorrhizae, we looked at the complex relationship between trees and other plants with fungi and bacteria in the soil. And in that episode, I quickly told a story that's almost too crazy to believe, and so is worth repeating. There are instances where mycorrhizal fungi recognize that nitrogen concentrations in the soil get dangerously low, both for them and for their plant hosts. So that can be devastating to the trees that they rely on. And so the fungi are actually able to attract springtails with pheromones because springtails love to eat the fungi, but then they kill them with toxins. And then after they kill them, they proceed to tap their mushroom hyphae into the springtail carcass to decompose it and then send the nitrogen from the insect's body to both themselves and their tree partners that really need it. So in one study, pine trees that were in low nitrogen conditions got 25% of their nitrogen from springtails. So insects feeding trees. And again, the springtails were lured by the pine tree's mycorrhizal fungi and then killed by that fungi. And the thing is, it's usually the springtails that eat fungi. And so the researchers said it's something like putting a pizza on the table to lure a college student with the smell of the yumminess. But then instead of the student eating the pizza eats the student and then shares the nutrients with the trees to make more cardboard boxes for the pizzas. Super bizarre and interesting relationship. I'll send the study out next week with my email. The springtails are everywhere. Wherever there's soil, there's springtails. And sometimes they'll even make their way into the damp areas of your house, like bathrooms or basements. We just really don't notice them very often. They're so tiny. They're great in terrariums as decomposers, but there's no evidence of springtails ever being harmful to humans, except the case of a researcher that accidentally aspirated some springtail eggs while using a pooter. And yes, pooter is the real name of the scientific instrument that entomologists use to catch insects in the field. And sorry, Tori, I don't really talk about poop in this episode, but I do get to say pooter. In any case, a researcher accidentally breathed in some springtail eggs. The pooter filter wasn't small enough to catch them. And then the eggs lodged in the nasal cavity and hatched. And then he got quite ill until he was able to have them removed. But that's the only known case, at least that I found, of springtails harming a human. So if you don't like that story, you get a better pooter. And like I said at the beginning, I love the direction that these episodes take. And so now we're going to move into X-Files material. So springtails are at the heart of one of the bigger stories you may never have heard of, that some consider conspiracy and others consider government cover-up like Area 51. But it was reported that the US Army experimented in using springtails in the Korean War as biological weapons to carry fatal diseases like anthrax and dysentery, cholera, and smallpox. And they were allegedly dropped by airplanes above rebel villages to be used as six-legged weapons, or at least they were studying or researching how to do that. Despite the US Army adamantly denying this, the Pine Bluff arsenal of biological weapons was destroyed in 1971 under the Nixon administration, along with any potential evidence of this program So we may never know. All right, so in healthy soils, there's an estimated 100,000 individuals in every square meter. And they're not just found in the soil, they're found in vegetation layer and trees and shrubs. They're macroscopic, meaning you can see them without a microscope, but they're so small and often dark that they're almost impossible to find without at least a magnifying glass, which is why the one species of springtails that we tend to be most familiar with is our friend, the snow flea. The snow flea, Hypogastrura nivicola, niva snow. And against a white backdrop of snow on a warmish winter day, it's not too hard to find snow fleas when you're out looking. The snow fleas themselves are out looking for food. And then my question was, well, what kind of food would an insect find on snow? But the key is that usually you find them when snow is melting. So it's a warmer day. And then as the snow melts, it uncovers any organic layer that had been accumulating on and in the snow. So as the snow melts, the organic material concentrates at the surface, which then equals a feast for snow fleas. And sometimes they can gather in huge numbers. The Bug Lady cites a study that found 1 million individuals in a colony that was only 1 foot across. So again, next time you're out in late winter and it's starting to warm up and there's still snow on the ground, I encourage you to look for them. They're around year round, but if your garden, you're surrounded by springtails and probably snow fleas too. But it's just so much easier to find them in the wintertime when there's snow. Often found around the base of trees, because as the snow starts to melt, it's usually that warm, dark color of the trees that kind of melts the snow around the base of the trees first. And the trunk radiates heat, and that kind of gives the snow fleas that access to the surface of the snow. So look around the base of trees, and it really looks as if someone came and sprinkled pepper on the snow, except if you look close enough, you see that those little pepper flakes are moving. And then every once in a while, one of them just completely disappears as the snow flea jumps to a new location. And when I say jump, I really mean catapult. On the rear of the abdomen, snow fleas and other springtails have an appendage called a furcular that they can pull tight to their body and secure with a hook, and then release it with great force, and that propels the animal up to 100 times its body length, which rivals the other great jumpers like fleas, which actually use their legs to jump, and the adult spittlebugs or the frog hoppers, which can jump 2 feet straight up, experiencing a force of 400 Gs of acceleration, but they also use their legs. So 100 times their length for a snow flea is like me jumping almost the length of 2 football fields. And also what's really fun for me to think about is that when snow fleas jump, they are not thinking about their landing spot, or at least you can't imagine that they could. Like a squirrel aims and anticipates a landing and probably calculates it. Snow fleas are just getting the quickly as they can the heck out of an area, and there's likely no aim or specific direction, and it's anyone's guess, including the snow flea, as to where it will land. So in some cases you have to wonder what's the sensibility of just flinging yourself into the air without a plan. But then I think, who am I to question a strategy that's been around for 400 million years and led to, surprisingly, one of the most prolific groups of organisms on the planet? There's only about 3 or 4 other groups that are more prolific than the columbilids. And besides, they don't have eyes. So does it really make a difference to them, knowing where they were before the jump or after the jump? But they probably sense the world in a slightly different way. And who knows, maybe it's a ton of fun.
Hey, Tim, we have a question. Do birds eat them? Or can they?
I don't know. That's an excellent question. It's something we'll look at, and if anybody else knows, they can chime in here. They're so tiny that I can't imagine. Most of the insect-eating birds aren't here when they could see them. Most of the winter birds here are eating berries, and not that they wouldn't eat an insect, but I don't know. They're so small, but I guess if you got a mouthful of snow with some snow fleas in, you'd get some nutrition. It's like, putting all the effort into pomegranate to get that tiny little pomegranate seed. But I don't know, it's a really good question. I'm not sure in terms of vertebrates, anything that feeds on them. There's a lot of invertebrates that feed on them. And that's why they jump. They jump to get away from being fed upon. So I mentioned that they were tiny. And here are snow fleas next to a penny from the Bug Lady site. Do you remember pennies? And she also goes on to say that these tiny creatures can travel at the breakneck speed of 30 inches per hour when they're not jumping across the forest floor, and sometimes more than 18 feet in a day. So what about this whole snow part of the snow flea? Snow is frozen water, and most insects and insect-like creatures don't do well in freezing, myself included. But snow fleas possess a unique glycine-rich protein that hadn't been previously seen in any animal or even really known to scientists. It has a unique way of being an antifreeze. And this is super cool. So the glycines bind to ice crystals as soon as they start to form, which then prevents them from growing larger and destroying the cells. Because without some way of checking their growth, ice can be super destructive inside your body, inside your cells. There are other organisms that have antifreeze properties in some form or another, like the trees, as Caitlin pointed out a few weeks ago, and famously wood frogs and other insects, and even a species of Arctic ground squirrel is able to withstand freezing temperatures. And it turns out there are a lot of applications to understanding how these animals survive freezing temperatures that are leading to advances in areas as mundane as better storage of transplant tissues and as important as producing better ice cream. The key, at least in the transplant storage, is finding chemicals that can store the organs for longer at lower temperatures, but then that break down easily once the organs are needed, and then brought up to temperature again. And apparently the chemicals in snow fleas are very promising in this area. And again, maybe we can get Larry to explain this a little bit more. But from what I understand, these proteins were new to science and to the animal world. And well, just because science always wants to be confusing to keep us on our toes, there is another species out there that is sometimes called a snow flea. And before this talk, we also found out about snow flies. But this particular snow flea is called the snow scorpion fly. Boreas hymalis. Hymalis means winter loving, as in Junco hymalis, the winter bird. And this species may make a better case of earning the name snow flea because they also venture out into the snow and they are insects, so more closely related to fleas. But we'll stick with what I learned and defend the snow flea as the name for the Springtail version. Snow scorpion flies are pretty cool though, and they get their name from the enlarged genitals that are sometimes curled up like a stinger of a scorpion, even though they don't sting. And scorpion flies apparently are important for forensic entomology to help determine the time of death, as scorpion flies only feed on relatively fresh flesh before being replaced by other carrion eaters that can tolerate greater degrees of decay. And before we wrap up, one final quick story. In Abkhazia, a region that broke away from Georgia on the Asian mainland, 2 species of springtails were found at 1,980 meters deep in the deepest cave in the world, making these 2 species of springtails the deepest dwelling land animals known to humans. And since there's no other animals that deep, you know what they eat? They eat each other. So what began as a basic fascination with the tiny creatures called snow fleas in this journey of knowledge ultimately led us to deep caves, mysterious weapons arsenals in Arkansas, the world of medical transplants, to a fungus that lures and kills animals to feed it to trees, to the reason that the earth smells earthy and rain smells rainy, a pooter gone bad, a government conspiracy, and a means to making better ice cream, all packed into a body about 1/16 of an inch long. So thanks for joining us this week. We hope to see you next week for owls, and we'll wrap up today's episode with 2 short videos on springtails, just a couple minutes long each, from my hero, David Attenborough. So enjoy And thanks for watching. Here's the first video.
But we seldom see them. This pin will give you an idea of why. They're tiny. This minute little creature is a springtail. It's less than 0.5 millimeter long, the size of a full stop. In 1 square meter of soil, there may be over 10,000 of them. Drying out is a very real danger for them, and some waterproof themselves regularly with a droplet of special grooming fluid. You might even say that they have turned bathing into an art form. They even have 2 inflatable tubes that enable them to get to those hard-to-reach places. To help them get around through the leaf litter, these springtails, as their name suggests, have a rather novel way of jumping. They have a tiny 2-pronged lever beneath their abdomen. One small flick from it can catapult them 6 inches, some 15 centimeters, into the air. It's the equivalent of a human being jumping over the Eiffel Tower. And if they happen to land upside down, well, they have a special way of righting themselves. They use their grooming fluid dispenser to stick onto the ground so that they can pull themselves back onto their feet.
That is so great. And one more quick one, part 2 of this.
A female springtail is bigger than a male, and she prefers a partner who can give her a sustained head-to-head push. Other males are eager to try their luck, but butting her sides won't get them anywhere. She seems unimpressed by any of them, but one is determined to stay as her dance partner. She simply can't get rid of him. He confidently signals victory with a couple of fancy twirls. Then he deposits a droplet of sperm onto the leaf, and she graciously takes it on board.
Who knew springtail courtship was so much fun? All right. Well, thanks, everyone.